Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Samantha. I'm a professional Vedic sidereal astrologer. So we're gonna do a really fun, in-depth Vedic astrology analysis into one of the most famous old Hollywood movie stars of our time. And I do feel like it's spooky season, and so I want to go into some of the heavy Scorpio 8th house energy and talk about what it really will show us in the lens of Vedic astrology. All right, so I was reading a little bit about Rita Hayworth's life story. She was obviously one of the most famous movie stars from back in the day. She was gorgeous, she was charismatic, she was talented, she was a great dancer, she was, really creative and stunning and beautiful and magnetic and alluring, charismatic, all the things that the 8th house will show us as well too. However, she did have a very intense and tumultuous life experience and life story. So when she was younger, she was sexually abused by her father. She had a lot of trauma in her upbringing. She had a lot of these power struggles and power dynamics with men in her life as she was going about her relationships and her marriages and going throughout her career. She also did have a sort of, confusing diagnosis as she was getting older. She was forgetting her lines, and it turns out that it was Alzheimer, but there's all these things going on that was very 8th house-like in her chart, and when I was reading this, I was like, this woman had to have a heavy 8th house Scorpio chart, and then lo and behold, I pull up her chart. She has Mars and Scorpio conjuncting Rahu and a 2-degree orb conjunction in the 8th house. So Lord knows that she was going through those intense 8th house experiences. All right, so we're going to do an in-depth analysis on her chart, how we can see everything that we can see, how we can understand her whole life story and trajectory through the Vedic lens as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up Rita Hayworth's Vedic sidereal astrology chart, and you guys can follow along, and we can learn a lot about astrology through this chart. All right, so here we have Rita Hayworth's Vedic sidereal astrology chart pulled up, and my goodness, is this an intense chart. All right, so as always in astrology, we're going to start with the ascendant, and we're going to go into her first house to see what the first house lord or the first house dispositor is in this chart. All right, so let's go over right here to the ascendant in Aries in the Kritika Nakshatra. Okay, Aries gets ruled by Mars, so her first house lord goes into the 8th house. Right away, that is a very intense energy in Vedic astrology. It actually creates kind of a Viprit Raja Yoga, which would show that someone deals with a lot of health issues, a lot of suffering, a lot of ups and downs in their life. Okay, we already have that slight Viprita Raja Yoga. All right, first house lord in the 8th house. Not only do we have her first house lord in the 8th house, we have Mars in the 8th house of Scorpio. Mars is naturally in Scorpio, so we have a very strong Mars. Then we have Rahu sitting next to it in a 2-degree orb conjunction, okay, in the 8th house. This is an intense 8th house, guys. This is a very, very potent and prominent 8th house, probably one of the strongest 8th house energies I've seen in someone's chart. Okay. First house lord in the 8th house in a Dastana house. What does that mean? Her life experience is very tumultuous. It's very up and down. She suffers a lot early on, but then she can reach success as she gets older. That is the Viprita Raja Yoga. Okay, it's said that when someone has the Viprita Raja Yoga, they will go through intense early experiences that will force them to change or heal or evolve in some way. And as they get older, they actually can get very successful, which is literally her life story. That is exactly what happened to a T. Okay, first house lord in the 8th house in a Dastana house of Viprita Raja Yoga. All right, I've seen a lot of times with the Viprita Raja Yoga as well too that people have a lot of health issues and things that come up for them around their health. Another example of someone who has the Viprita Raja Yoga is Frida Kahlo. She had a very intense life experience, a lot of health issues, but then she became vastly successful as an artist, right? You'll see that a lot, okay? So we see the Viprita Raja Yoga, we see the first house lord in the 8th house in a Dastana house, we see Mars and Scorpio in a tight conjunction with Rahu. My God, this is a crazy chart. All right, okay. So first house lord in the 8th house will show that someone is bringing all of these 8th house experiences into their first house, okay? So first house lord in the 8th house. What is the 8th house? Let's start with that. The 8th house is the house of intense transformation. The 8th house is the house of sexuality. The 8th house is the house of very tumultuous, sort of up and down life experiences. And the eighth house is also the house of charisma and magnetism. Okay. One of my favorite Vedic astrologers, James Braha, always said that if someone has Mars in the eighth house, you have to watch for sexual abuse and sexual trauma in the chart. Okay. And Rita Hayworth not only has Mars in the eighth house, it's in its own sign of Scorpio, it's also in the Jyeshta nakshatra as well too. It's also in a tight conjunction with Rahu in a 2-degree orb as well too. So the tighter an orb conjunction, the more that energy is felt. Okay, so Mars is 19 degrees, Rahu is 21 degrees. It's in about a 2-degree orb conjunction in the chart. That's a very tight conjunction. So whenever a conjunction is tight like that, someone is feeling the energy in the most sort of potent and strong way as well too. Mars in its own sign in Scorpio, Viprit Raj Yoga, first house lord in the eighth house. This is a very, very intense eighth house, okay? She had a lot of sexual abuse and sexual trauma when she was younger, okay? If I saw this and this was like a client's chart, that would be the first thing that would go off in my mind, okay? And that was her whole early childhood upbringing experience, okay? All right, so Mars Rahu in Jyeshta in the 8th house of Scorpio. The good thing about Mars Rahu in its own sign, Mars in its own sign of Scorpio in the 8th house, it will create a lot of charisma. Okay, someone is going to be very charismatic with Mars conjuncting Rahu in the 8th house of Scorpio. Best believe it. They're going to be sexually alluring. They're going to be sexually magnetic. They're going to be charismatic. She was literally called like the goddess of love or something of that nature. That is Mars Rahu in the 8th house of Scorpio. A lot of magnetism, a lot of sexual charisma. But the problem with so much sexual energy and so much sexual charisma is it can cause these like abuse issues as well too, because Mars is malefic. Rahu's like a mild malefic is how I see it, because what Rahu does is it expands everything that it goes next to. So it's expanding the Mars energy, expanding the charisma, expanding the sexual magnetism, but also expanding the potential for issues of abuse as well too with Mars Rahu in that tight conjunction in Scorpio in the 8th house. So we can see it all. We can see her entire life story already. Like, it's all right there in that one placement of her chart. But let's keep going and look at other stuff that's going on as well, too. So let's hop over to her 7th house where she has the Sun, Mercury, and Libra. So Sun is not in its best placement in the 7th house, and it doesn't really like to be there, right? So what is the Sun? Sun is the Karaka, or the indicator of the father. Okay, so she had a lot of issues with her father and her upbringing, okay? Sun in a tight conjunction with Mercury. She was probably pretty intellectual, and she, Sun conjunct Mercury, she had a good sense of intellect and wit about her as well, too. The issue with the Sun and Libra in the 7th house is it does cause relationship issues and power dynamic issues, which was her whole life experience, right? The reason being that Sun in the 7th will create partners that are solar-like, they're sun-like. What is the Sun? The Sun burns very bright, it burns very hot, it burns very intensely, but it also burns things out, okay? 7th house is relationships. So she was attracting relationships where there was a lot of power dynamics, power issues, power struggles, because that Sun is weak in the 7th house of Libra, okay? So also her Darakaraka right here, the indicator of the spouse, is the Sun in the 7th. That's a really strong solar energy for the relationships that she is attracting, okay? She's attracting wealthy, she's attracting famous, she's attracting people that have wealth or notoriety in some way. I'm sure she dated a ton of actors, Sun in the 7th house, Darakaraka Sun, but also she attracts people that have a kind of ego issue as well in this lifetime. Okay, and also Sun in the 7th is a classic placement for people that hop a lot from relationship to relationship, marriage to marriage, and can never really settle into something. Because the Sun in the 7th, people are always looking for the next best thing. That is something that I learned from James Braha, okay, one of my favorite Vedic astrologers. He said that the Sun in the 7th house will be people that always are looking for something else, looking for something better, so it causes issues in marriage and commitment. Okay, which is literally what happened to her. She had like so many different marriages and so many different relationships, but it was hard for her to settle into one thing. All right, so then we see her 7th house lord goes into the 6th house. Seventh house Lord in the sixth house doesn't really do favors for relationships either, because the sixth house is kind of a house that feels like it causes issues, and the sixth house is a Dastana house, right? Not a great house for the seventh house Lord to be disposited in. And then we see a debilitated Venus as well too. So debilitated Venus in Virgo can also show us issues around relationships. So this is a chart where we see a lot of issues around the relationships. It's very obvious, it's very clear. Seventh house Lord in the sixth house, Sun in the seventh, Dark Karaka Sun, a weak Sun in the seventh house of Libra. There are issues here with relationships. All right, we also see Saturn in Magha Nakshatra in the fifth house of Leo. So Saturn in the fifth, in Vedic astrology, Saturn can key the career. All right, it's in Magha, one of the most creative nakshatras. So that would show us that she has an ability to do a career that connects to fifth house Magha energy, which would be creativity, which would be the arts, which would be performing. Then we also see Jupiter in her third house. The two houses that we are looking for a creative career is the third house and the fifth house. Okay? Jupiter, the great benefic, is in her third house. So that's a really positive energy. Okay? We see that she can do really well in those third house endeavors. Performing, creativity, expression. Saturn in the fifth of Leo, in one of the most creative nakshatras, can show that her Saturn energy, her career, can be Magha and Leo-like and fifth house-like. Okay, we also see Moon in the 12th house of Pisces. 12th house is film, photography, and television. The Moon is the masses, so she can be seen through the masses through film, photography, and television. Okay, and then we also go over to her 10th house, and lo and behold, her 10th house Lord is in the 5th house with Saturn sitting there, okay? 10th house Lord keys the career as well too. 5th house is creativity. I told you guys when we're looking for a creative career, we want to find connections between the career and the 3rd house and the 5th house. 10th house Lord disposited by the 5th house of creativity and performing and the arts. All right, clear as day. That's an obvious one. Sometimes it takes a little longer to find things in charts, but 10th house Lord in the 5th house is literally a career in the creative. And then we see Saturn in that 5th house, another indicator of the career. All right, and then we can also see from Chandra Lagna. So let's flip the chart from Chandra Lagna. Let's make the moon the ascendant. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Guess what, guys? From Chandra Lagna, we also get a heavy 8th house. Sun, Mercury conjunct 8th from the moon. So not only do we have two planetary energies and two strong planetary energies in the 8th house from the ascendant or the Lagna, we flip it from Chandra Lagna, we get the same thing, okay? Here's the thing about Vedic astrology. Something that my teacher always told me is if you get something from Lagna or ascendant, and then you get it from Chandra Lagna or moon as the ascendant, best believe you have something that you can bet on in Vedic astrology, okay? So we see the same story being told from Chandra Lagna, all right? We see all these planets going 8th from the moon, okay? So we can see that this 8th house is very potent and very strong, once again. And then if we go from Chandra Lagna, this is very interesting. We see that Mars Rahu is in the 9th house of the father. Now, isn't that interesting? The sexual abuse and the sexual trauma was from her father, quite literally. Okay, so when we flip it from Chandra Lagna, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's how you do Chandra Lagna. You make the moon the first house, and you count around. We get to the 9th house where we see Mars and Rahu in Scorpio, okay? So Mars, Rahu, 9th from the moon, shows issues with the father, and these can be related to abuse and sexuality because Mars is with Rahu in a tight conjunction in Scorpio, 9th from the moon, okay? This is easy to predict. This is so easy to predict through Vedic astrology, that there was sexual abuse and issues and trauma with the father, all right? Now, interestingly enough, when I saw all that energy going 9th from the moon, I was wondering if she was like very spiritual or religious as well too, because when we see a lot of 9th house heavy energy, Mars in its own sign conjuncting Rahu in the 9th house, people have very strong beliefs and philosophies. Okay, she also has Atmakarka Jupiter. Jupiter is the Karka for philosophy and, beliefs and religion and higher learning and spirituality and all those things. And when I looked into it, she was very about her religion. She was extremely religious. That's Mars Rahu going ninth from the moon. That is Jupiter at Makaraka. She had really strong beliefs in this lifetime as well, too. Okay, so it's always fun to see that stuff when you're like, huh, was she blah, blah, blah? And then you look it up and it's like, oh, yeah. You can always see it through Vedic astrology. All right, and what I find interesting about this chart as well, too, is, her AMK. So her second highest degree planet is Venus. And I'm kind of going to do more study into this before I come to a full conclusion on this. But I've seen many, many charts of famous actresses and singers and, artists where their AMK is Venus. Okay, because the second highest degree planet in the Karkas can show someone's career and what they're doing in this lifetime. So the Atmakarka is the sole purpose, which in her chart is in the third house, right? So her sole purpose, Jupiter in Punavasu in the third house of Gemini, means that her sole purpose planet is in the third house of creativity and the arts, right? We see that she has a very artistic and creative chart. So her soul gets lit up by performing, creating, writing, expressing, all those things. That's Jupiter at Makaraka in the third house. All right, and then the AMK, so the second highest degree planet, is Venus in the sixth house of Virgo. Sixth house can also show the career because sixth house is our daily routines, our work, what we do every day. Venus sits there, so every day she was getting beautiful, she was performing, she was dancing, she was creating. That's Venus in the sixth house. It is debilitated, so there were some issues with Venus energy. Maybe she had some money issues at different points. Maybe she had issues. Not maybe. We know she had a lot of relationship issues with that debilitated Venus. It's also in Hasta, so I wonder if she did something with her hands. The Hasta nakshatra rules the hands. Maybe she had some sort of creative talent, or she liked to do something or work with her hands in some way. I'd love to know about that. Whenever I have clients with Hasta nakshatra, I always ask them, do you work with your hands? Do you do something with your hands? The funniest manifestation I saw of that was actually someone's husband was a Hasta nakshatra prominent. And I was like, does your husband do anything with his hands? And she was saying that he was a builder, so he would build things with his hands all the time. And he was a contractor. And I was like, oh, that's the Hasta. Really cool to see how nakshatras really work in Vedic astrology. Something else I find very interesting about this chart is she has moon in Pisces in the 12th house. So she was very sensitive. So much Moshka energy. We have the 8th house strong, Scorpio strong, 12th house strong. This is a Moshka chart, guys. This is a chart of intense experiences that will force someone to evolve and heal and grow and go through intense psychological transformation in their lifetime. Okay? If you see Mars Rahu in Scorpio in the 8th house of Scorpio, you see Moon in Pisces in the 12th house, you see the first house lord in the 8th house, you see a Viprit Raj Yoga, Lord knows that this person is going through intense experiences, intense. All right? But kind of the saving grace of this chart is the creativity. Jupiter in the third, in Punavasu Nakshatra, which shows return to the light. Okay, so the way that she would kind of return to the light and heal herself was through that third house energy, the creative, the artistic. Okay, and Mars Rahu in Scorpio in the 8th house, a lot of charisma, very charismatic chart. It's no coincidence that someone with Mars conjuncting Rahu in the 8th house of Scorpio was called the goddess of love. Come on now, that's the most obvious thing that we can see there. All right, the 8th house is the sexual, it's the charismatic. We also see so much of that energy. Her first house of Aries getting disposited by Mars means that her appearance is very Mars-like as well, too. Mars is very sexual, very charismatic as well. All right, so this was a little in-depth analysis into Rita Hayworth's Vedic sidereal astrology chart. I hope you guys learned from this. I think the best way to do astrology, well, first of all, the first best way to do astrology is to get trained in it. No one's going to learn Vedic astrology without a teacher, guru, or guide. That's just not going to happen. But the second best way to learn Vedic astrology once you are trained in it and have your teacher and your guide is to practice, 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 practice. Do so many charts every day that you start seeing themes and start unraveling what is going on, okay? Because practicing astrology is very different than intellectualizing astrology. You have to practice, you have to just go into it to really learn these things as well too. All right, so this was a in-depth analysis into Rita Hayworth's Vedic sidereal astrology chart, one of our most famous and iconic actresses, but also someone who lived such an intense life experience. 8th house, baby. Mars, Rahu in the 8th house of Scorpio and the Jyesta Nakshatra. Jyesta is also such an intense nakshatra. We can see it all. We can see it all in the charts. It's always very obvious. All right, I hope you guys have such a beautiful, blessed day. Let me know down below any further in-depth chart analysis you want me to go into, any suggestions, any video ideas. Really open to them. All right, talk soon, guys.